Peace BAIO family, I'm your host Jabari Lamb. This is another edition of the BAIO News. And in this video, we'll be talking about the Republic of Maryland. Now, what was the Republic of Maryland? The Republic of Maryland was an independent nation state that is in today in Liberia, known as Maryland County. Before I continue today's video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you comment down below. Tell us what you think about these videos. Do you find these videos to be informative? Are you learning information you've never heard about? Let us know what you think so we can give feedback on more information to provide you. And of course, make sure you sign up to the website at baioafrikstan.org/register. Now, to continue on with the Republic of Maryland. The Republic of Maryland, like I said earlier, is in Maryland County. It is now one of the 15 counties in Liberia, and its capital is Harper. Now, how did Maryland start out? Well, Maryland started out with the founding of the Maryland State Colonization Society. Now, the Maryland State Colonization Society was the Maryland version of the American Colonization Society, and we've spoken about the American Colonization Society numerous times. The Maryland State Colonization Society was one of many, like the Pennsylvania Colonization Society, the New York Colonization Society, the Louisiana State Colonization Society, the Mississippi State Colonization Society. These were a number of state colonies that were dedicated to sending free black immigrants to Liberia. So the Maryland State Colonization Society was founded in 1831. Okay? And it was created by the Maryland legislature in the state of Maryland, and they budgeted $10,000 per year for the next 20 years to allow for freed slaves to return to what was then called Maryland in Liberia or Maryland in Africa. It also later became known as the independent state of Maryland. Other names that will be known that are used for what will then become known as the Republic of Maryland. So the $10,000 was allotted for 20 years. The goal was to send about 10,000 African Americans to Maryland in Africa, also known as Maryland, Liberia. You can choose which one. And it was to provide, housing, food for 6 months, make sure that they fund a passenger ship so that they would be able to go there. Make sure that they could purchase land because obviously you need land to go to. So this all happens, and about 1,000 African Americans would immigrate to Maryland in Africa, although that was well short of what the Maryland State Colonization Society wanted. So after 20 years in 1852, they were planning on scraping the $10,000 annually. However, the Maryland State legislature voted to continue doing this for another 6 years. And, by 1857, there was over 900 African American immigrants, and there were 60,000, ethnic people of the Grebo crew and, other ethnic groups. But the two major ones, like I mentioned, were the Grebo and the crew. So the MSCS, the Maryland State Colonization Society, continued to send immigrants to Maryland in Africa until 1869, and that was when 15 people were sent, a very small, ship. And after 1869, 3 years, afterwards, the society ceased operations. In the 1900s, the records would be given. It's the same thing what happened with the American Colonization Society in 1902 or 1903. The last ship for Liberia went, and in 1964, the records of the American Colonization Society were handed over. So Maryland and Africa, they had their own constitution. They had their own government. It was separate from Liberia. So Maryland in Africa was its own separate entity, similar to how Mississippi in Africa was its own entity before it became known as Socio County, one of the three original counties of Liberia. So at this time, Maryland and Liberia, what we call it today, also known as Maryland and Africa, they were two separate things. They were not the same. So Monrovia had no control over what was going on in Harper and in Maryland and Africa. So it was ruled by 3 consecutive governors, although for a 3-month period, they in 1836 they had a committee that had 3 men on it. And you will see that later on when you learn about who led the Republic of Maryland, who were the heads of state of Republic of Maryland, Maryland in Africa, and afterwards, James Hall would become the first head. So it was James Hall and then Oliver Holmes Jr. So the flag of Maryland has a cross. It has yellow and white, black alternate, and of course it has a blue emblem. So of course, the cross symbolizes Christianity. It's similar to Liberia. Liberia, before it had the star, had a cross indicating, Christianity, the Christianization of Africa. Bringing quote unquote civilization to Africa. And this was a theme common throughout a lot of classical black nationalist thought. Now, I did a video on my smaller channel debunking the myths of African Americans in Liberian history, and I talk about classical black nationalism and modern black nationalism, and that classical black nationalism was more of a westernized, going from a Eurocentric perspective. It wasn't really centered on African culture, and this was not just, with the people in Liberia. It was also in Marcus Garvey. It was Henry Medill Turner. It was the Zulus that were later educated during this time period. Or one of the kings in Liberia, Mamadou Massaquoi, converted from Islam to Christianity, and he thought that Christianity could uplift, Africa. So be it as it may, it was really centered on, Western values and European values. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking important aspects of, European culture or Western values, but just completely neglecting, the indigenous roots. I think, it is something that, we can analyze, and look at what they possibly could have done better. So in 1854, the state declared its independence because it wanted to have trade. It wanted to have monopoly over its trade. The boundaries were Grand Cess and San Pedro, although it did extend to the Kavala River, and actually some of Ivory Coast, where Ivory Coast is, was actually taken from Maryland County. So this was happened in the 1892 Franco-Liberian Treaty. So the Maryland, like I said, it wanted to maintain its trade monopoly, and so it had a referendum in 1853. So in 1854, it becomes independent, and for some of the early years, it was thriving. But then you have the Grebo Maryland War. And the Grebo Maryland War is when, during an expedition, 20 or so Black American immigrants get killed by, the Grebos and the Crews and other indigenous, peoples. There was conflict over the slave trade that was going on there because some, especially like the Grebos, were still doing the slave trade. And so that was an issue there. And so there was much conflict between the people in Maryland and, the indigenous people that resulted in the Grebo Maryland War in 1856 to 1857. So after this happens and they suffered this, had these casualties and what you can amount to a defeat, Maryland, then realizes it could not survive on its own and it was going to get to Liberia at all costs. So they pleaded to Liberia to allow them to come into Liberia. Originally, they refused, and then they have a referendum in Maryland. They vote for it overwhelmingly. Then the Liberian legislature passes an act in 1857 that would allow for the annexation of the Republic of Maryland to become officially Maryland County, the fifth oldest county in Liberia after Montserrado, Grand Bassa, Sonoa, Grand Cape Mount came in just the year prior in 1856, and Maryland would become the fifth oldest county in Liberia. And during that time, they had $6,000 worth of assets. It was a lot during that time, and so all of that was pretty much handed over when Maryland was annexed into Liberia. And one of the major reasons why they were annexed is because during that time they pleaded for Roberts and then later Stephen Allen Benson to send troops there, and that's what would quell the conflict between the Maryland immigrants, and the the Grebos and other indigenous people. And so, you know, so today it's Maryland County. It's one of the more developed regions in Liberia, especially Harper. It has a lot of historical sites there. Um, and it's hosted some great black leaders. So an example, somebody who I have great respect for. He was the first black man to own a newspaper. It was John Brown Russwurm. But you also have leaders like Samuel Ford McGill, and you also have Boston William A. Proud and Boston Jenkins Drayton. And before you had a three-member committee. Like I said before, you had James Hall, who was the first, and Oliver Holmes Jr. So this is some information on the Republic of Maryland, the second independent republic in Africa. Once again, this is Jabari Lamb of the BAIO News. Peace.